Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you've joined us today. We're going to be talking about managing your workforce, some best practices around that. But before we get into all of that, just a few little housekeeping items. I'm Hannah Curtis. I'm with the North Metro Small Business Development Center. So for anyone who's not familiar with the SBDC, we offer free one-on-one consulting with our business advisors, as well as educational opportunities like these webinars and the courses that I mentioned. And always want to be helping you with whatever questions you have in your business and however we can help you access resources for your business. We also want to give a big thank you to our partners with the City of Westminster Economic Development. They are co-sponsoring this session today, and this is the first of a series of educational offerings that they have for workforce topics. So I'll put a link into the chat where you can see those other sessions that are coming up in June. Some really exciting topics there. So big thank you to them. And they have a ton of great resources for businesses as well. So we encourage you to check out their website and connect with them if you haven't already. So we are recording today's session, and I will send out the slides afterwards. And then the recording will go on the video library in our website. So you can always access this information after the fact if you need to. So don't feel like you need to scramble to take notes. We hope that you'll be able to feel present during Courtney's presentation, and feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat, and hopefully at the end we might have some time for Q&A as well. And Courtney is one of our lovely SBDC consultants as well. So if you do have questions that are really specific to your situation, those are probably best for a one-on-one consultation, which again are free. And so we hope you would take advantage of that. And I'll put a link into the chat where you can learn more about our consulting. But any good general questions are great to put into the chat there. I think those are most of our announcements, but if you do have any questions about anything really, feel free to put that in the chat. And I do want to introduce Courtney Berg. She is owner of Courtside Consulting. And like I said, she's been with the SBDC for several years and is our guru for all things HR. So we're excited to hear what she has to tell us today. And with that, Courtney, I will turn it over to you. Oh, I knew I was forgetting something. I am going to turn the captions on for anyone who needs that accessibility feature. But if it's in your way, there's a little X in the corner for any of you attendees. You can exit out of that, or you can move it around if it on your screen is covering anything on the presentation. So now with that, I will turn it over to you, Courtney.
Hannah, thanks so much. Thanks to the North Metro SBDC and to the City of Westminster for sponsoring this event. It is wonderful to be able to talk to you this morning. I am so glad that all of you have had an opportunity to join us this morning. We're talking about something very important, managing your workforce and looking at those best practices. Tina Fey, the actor, said, in most cases, being a good boss means hiring talented people and then getting out of their way. And really that is true, right? That is the best scenario that we can all hope for. It's not always the case though, right? It's not always, oh, we're going to hire this person and I'm going to get out of their way and everything's going to be perfect. Oftentimes we find that what we have to do is actually manage the people. We have to actually be managers and leaders in that respect. So we have to do things like planning and directing and controlling and all of those things that go with managers and management. And so that's important because there are times that we have to manage even our best employees through a situation, help them navigate something, or help them realize that maybe the way they're looking at it isn't the right way and there's other solutions that are possible. So this presentation is going to give you some tips on how to manage your workforce, how to manage your employees. So what are we going to talk about in the next hour? Well, I covered these topics that are listed here in the agenda, but I can't cover everything in an hour. So I'm hitting the highlights. There's a lot more material that you could learn, but this is a good start. This is going to give you some of that foundation. So we're going to cover what are the best practices in hiring new employees, and we're going to cover different aspects of hiring. What are the regulations you need to know? Again, there is no way just in this hour that I could cover all of those regulations, but we're going to hit a couple of highlights in Colorado. And then how do you keep your great employees? Right now, obviously, there's some hiring challenges. And so retaining your employees is even more important than it has been in the past. So we're going to be talking about that. So let's start out with hiring. What's it like out there? Are you having a lot of luck finding people? Is it hard to find people? What are you finding? You can just put some information in the chat or unmute yourself and let me know. And Hannah, I'm going to ask if maybe you can help me just with any chat comments that might be happening.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Feel free, anyone, to put your comments in the chat, or like Courtney said, feel free to come off mute right now. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I am all about participation, and when it's virtual, it's harder because we're not in a classroom. So, but please feel free if you need something, raise your hand. Hannah's going to help us with that. Is there anything that we need to just visit about, Hannah? Anything that's popped up?
We have a few comments that, well, one person mentioned they haven't started yet. So this is probably
Okay,
good for them to
great.
get an idea of what they should be on the lookout for.
Sure.
Another mentioned that it's just really hard to find good candidates right now.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what we're seeing. So when you look at this slide is a little hard to see, and I'm not expecting anybody to actually dive into those details. When you get the PDF, you can blow it up and look at it a little bit more. But what we're finding federally, the federal unemployment statistics right now are 3.5. We're at a 3.5% unemployment. And when I'm going to just glance over here. When you look back during the pandemic, we got up to 14.8. That was our high, I believe, and that was in April. So that was just about 3 years, just over 3 years ago, we were at our high unemployment federally. In the state, I love to see all the green. So all the green is saying that the state of Colorado, we're seeing below 5% or less in many of the counties across Colorado. The yellows are looking at 6 to 7%. So we're seeing some of those higher unemployment rates in some of the southern areas and southern counties. But the bottom line is throughout Colorado, we're experiencing a similar problem. And that is it's difficult to find good employees. And even if we find them, we're seeing them leave. Why is that? Well, if you remember during the pandemic, we started talking about the Great Resignation, right? Mm-hmm. I was reading a Forbes article a few weeks ago, and they talked about the Great Reassessment. I think that's more accurate. The pandemic has caused many, if not all of us, to really reassess what we're doing. Are we happy in our jobs? Are we fulfilled in our jobs? What's important to us? And we've had a lot of time to reflect on that throughout the last 3 years. Businesses are starting to come back now to saying, you've got to be in the office. And the employees are giving pushback saying, why? I don't understand why I have to be in the office. I didn't have to be in the office during the pandemic. Why are you making me come back now? And so there's a lot of this pushback that we're experiencing through the Great Reassessment, where people are saying, oh, I don't want to be in the office all the time. Maybe a hybrid is okay, a couple of days a week, but I want to be at home. I really enjoyed working at home, and I got a lot more done because people weren't at my desk all the time, right? So as we began to assess what was going on in our lives, we decided we wanted to work differently. And so not only are you fighting a low unemployment rate, so there's not as many candidates out there, but you're also fighting the, really the employee-centric job market right now, where employees are saying, if you can't hire me and I can't do this, then I can go somewhere else. Or I'm working for you and you want to, you want me to come back to the office. I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go find another job, right? So all of those things are true, and it's very difficult as an employee market. We're just seeing them leave, and so those tenures are going up. Ooh, I think I saw a hand.
Yeah, looks like Diane has her hand up.
Hi, Diane.
I'm wondering what your observations are if one of the problems to hiring is that the workforce, potential employees are more savvy in picking up on signals of toxic leadership and work environments.
Yes.
This is a big reason why people leave. They're just not going to put up with stuff anymore that used to, be the norm. And I'm wondering what you see about that.
Yeah, May is actually Mental Health Month, right? And so we're talking a lot about mental health. We should be talking about mental health all the time in your business. And you should be addressing mental health issues that could be happening, bullying, right? Gossiping, those types of things that can create mental health issues. What I'm seeing is exactly what you're seeing. People are not putting up with what they used to put up with. And so they're saying, "Oh, you know what? This workplace is toxic to me, I'm out." And they leave. And
Mhm.
no notice. Sometimes they go away to lunch and don't come back, or they'll send you a text and say, "I'm done." I've seen employees just call in absent, just continually call in absent. So then and there's a attendance problem. Those types of things are happening every single day in almost every employer across the United States because people are just saying, "I'm not going to deal with it anymore."
But do you
You
think
know,
they're better at picking up on signals? Like they're not taking jobs that are offered if they're picking up on signals of toxicity?
yep, I
Yeah.
think that's true. And
Okay.
they're asking, when you think about the interview, they're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. And so they're going to be asking questions that are going to identify some of those toxic behaviors. On average, how many people, work over 40 hours? And that's a telltale sign. They're going to say, "Oh, people are feeling overworked. There's not enough employees, and so they're putting in all these extra hours." May or may not be true, but they're going to identify that as a step towards a toxic environment because, well, the managers aren't taking care of the employees and they're making them work extra, right? And so there's some different things that can happen there for sure. Yeah, great point. Thank you, Diane. Okay. All right, well, let's move on. So where are all the candidates? When people leave, most of us need to fill their spot. Some people are saying, "Ooh, attrition, that's good. I can save some budget money, and so I'm not going to fill that spot." But most people have the work for that person to be for that position, excuse me, to be filled. So with the increasing difficulty in how to fill it, then what are the options? What's tough is that employers don't have many new and exciting options. The options have been there. And so it depends on what you're doing. We've got to cast a bigger net. So if you've been putting things in Indeed and maybe Craigslist or maybe ZipRecruiter, right? Cast a bigger net now. Start looking at other resources for employees. There are a lot of ways to post jobs online. And so the one website that I put up here, fitsmallbusiness.com, free job postings sites. They actually give more resources for job posting. So it's something to check out. And just don't forget when you're posting jobs, this is one of the things that we'll talk about here in a minute with regulations, but when you're posting jobs, you must follow the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act when you're doing that, internally and externally. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you've got to be posting the job duties along with the range of pay and the benefits that are offered for that job. And those are things that have to be in Colorado job postings now. Okay. So there are other resources for you outside of job postings online. And what I call this is the 3-foot rule. So what do I mean by that? When we're starting our business and we're looking for clients, we always say, "Ooh, anybody within 3 feet, I'm going to talk to them about my business and ask them what they're doing and ask them, get them to a point where we're going to start finding out if that person could be a client, if I could help that person," right? Just in casual conversation. And so when you look at this slide and you see all these things, car wash, football game, concert, skiing, hiking, theater, whatever that is, soccer field, as you're standing around watching the kids on the soccer field, you can find candidates anywhere. You just need to kind of think about how you built your customer base and start thinking of recruiting as the same thing. You're building your brand, you're becoming an employer of choice, you're building the pipeline for employees for you. A couple of stories I wanted to share. I used to recruit for a major insurance company, and I was over in Utah all the time. So I was flying from Denver to Utah every other week, and I would stay there and work with the employees who were there, and then also do recruiting. And oftentimes I would do recruiting all day, 5 days a week. So it would be 8 to 5, I would break for lunch. I would then recruit in the afternoon, that kind of thing. And what I found were some of the best candidates I found was when I ate lunch or ate dinner and talked to the wait staff. Okay. Rather than, the interviews that I had at the colleges, yeah, they were great candidates, but I found great candidates actually, somebody'd serve me lunch. They were great at customer service. They were really engaged, really interactive. And I'd say, hey, is this what you want to do? Do you want to own a restaurant? Are you going to go into, hospitality? What are you looking at? No, I just graduated. I don't have a job and I'm not sure what to do. Ooh, you want to talk? Right. One of the success stories that I have is an individual who actually came to fix the plumbing in my bathroom. And she came in and she's fixing the plumbing in my bathroom. And I had the same kind of conversation with her and was able to hire her. She moved up into the executive level, opened her own business, and is now CEO of a $50 million company. So, when you take somebody from fixing a toilet to a CEO of a $50 million company, that's pretty exciting. So you never know when you're going to find great employees. Okay. So that's the end of the hiring section. Just again, a quick look, and we're going to highlight these things and then move on. But certainly I'm available to answer questions throughout or at the end. So are there any questions right now on hiring, or should we move on to the regulations?
We don't have any questions on hiring in the chat right now, so I think we're good to move on.
Okay, perfect. So what regulations do we have to follow? Well, we don't have time, as I said, to review all the regulations. There are a lot out there, but I wanted to bring up just a couple of newer regulations within Colorado that you need to be aware of. The other thing I'm going to tell you to do is really easy. If you go to Google, you can actually put out a Google alert for Colorado employment law. And when you do that, you can pick how often you want to get emails, but Google will send you emails with articles with anything having to do with Colorado employment law. And so, something with the, Colorado Secure Savings Act, or something with family, the new legislation about the insurance that we need to be following. Those types of things, those will just come into your inbox and you're going to get that information. So please do that. It's for free and it gets a lot of information to you. But the two that I wanted to talk about today, the two laws that I really wanted to talk about specifically in Colorado, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. This is a summary of the act and it only highlights the act. These are not the only things that the act requires, but it does include some of those highlights. So it is required by employers with one employee in Colorado. One, that's all you have to have, and it applies to you. It requires records of jobs description and wage information for 2 years after the termination. You have to keep that, and that gets back to, you've got to be able to say this is the rate that they were paid, these are the benefits that they received, this is the job that they did. So part of your job descriptions have to include that information as well. It prohibits pay based on sex, asking or relying on salary history. So you can't say, what did you make in your last job? The way that I phrase the question is, the range for this job is between $50,000 and $60,000. And make sure that they know what the range is before you walk down to, okay, great, here's your job, it's $55,000. No, that's not even close to what I need. Okay, well, that's, this is what the range is. So make sure that they know that. Prohibits restricting employees from talking about compensation with each other. This is a touchy one. As business owners, we look at that and we say, we don't want our employees to talk about their salary to each other. It's now legally their right to do that. So you cannot prohibit, whereas, my grandfather, who started a furniture store in Greeley in the 40s, could tell people don't talk about anything. And nobody, there wasn't any law that protected the employees in those situations. But now the employees have the legal right to have discussions about their pay with each other. Must post compensation range and general benefit description and job posting. I've talked about that. And must announce promotional opportunities to Colorado employees prior to decision. This one's tough. So let's say that you have an administrative assistant that works for you, and you have an accounting manager that's the job that's available. You know that administrative assistant doesn't have the accounting background or the skills or anything having to do with accounting that would make them qualified for that accounting manager job. However, that administrative assistant sees the accounting manager job as a promotional opportunity. That's what you have to drive to. Could that as administrative assistant see that accounting manager job as a promotional opportunity? And if so, I need to post the accounting manager job. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Internally, post the job, right? Don't worry about who might see it as a promotional opportunity and whether or not that person is qualified. What you need to be doing is posting those jobs that you have open to internal candidates and external candidates. Sometimes people just want to post them internally. That's fine, but don't just post them externally. You need to let your internal candidates know, hey, this job is available. Okay. And some people, just so you know, to make that a little bit easier, they just point to the job posting. Hey, we've posted a new job on our website. Here's the link. And they send out an email. That's all you have to do, is just make sure that they know about it. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. This started in January of 2021 for 16 or more employees. Now, effective January 1st of 2022, it's all employers who have any employees. You have to provide sick leave to all employees. You provide 1 hour per 30 hours worked, up to 48 hours total. This is for part-time, full-time, whomever. These are the sick leave that you have to provide. So some of the other points are listed there. I think it's really important to remember that the sick leave is for all employees, part-time or full-time, that the sick leave is not payable upon termination. So that means that if you keep it separate from PTO and you say, these are your sick hours, you don't have to pay that out when the person terminates. Colorado law states you have to pay the PTO out, but you don't have to pay out sick leave. If you include the sick leave in PTO, which some companies do, you have to have a policy that says that's what you're doing, and you have to pay all the PTO out. So it would not, you wouldn't subtract out sick hours or anything from that, from the PTO. You would actually have to pay out that entire PTO bank that's accrued but unused. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let's move on to state and federal employment laws: discrimination and harassment, compensation and overtime, safety, protected leaves, workers' comp. Those are all laws that you have to follow, that are important to follow, and you need to be aware of those on a state and federal level. When we talk about discrimination and harassment, there are a lot of federal laws. There's also a state law. So when you look at the federal laws, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, right? Well, that applies to employers with 15 or more employees. So if you think, oh, I only have 5 employees, so that doesn't apply to me, that might be correct. However, look under the state laws. The Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, which basically mirrors the Civil Rights Act, applies to all employers. So those are the things you have to know. Okay, you know what? I can't discriminate. Even though I don't have 15 or more employees, some of those same laws that are under the Civil Rights Act are in the CADA, the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. So I need to make sure that I'm following that. Okay. So what are we talking about when we talk about discrimination? I've listed some things here that are covered under the discrimination laws: race, color, religion, creed, national origin, ancestry, sex, pregnancy, and age. Those either are covered under the Civil Rights Act, the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, or they have their own act, like the Pregnancy Non-Discrimination Act, or the Age Act, right? Sexual orientation, including transgender status, gender identity, expression, genetic information, that really has come about with all of the 23andMe and the Ancestry.com and all of those things, where we can actually do medical tests now to say, oh, you know what, I have the cancer gene, or oh, I have the Alzheimer's gene, or I have whatever those genes are. We now can't discriminate against somebody and say, well, if you have the cancer gene, I don't want you on my healthcare policy, so I'm not going to hire you. That's the kind of discrimination we cannot do. We can't consider that information when we're hiring or promoting or taking any kind of employment action. Physical or mental disabilities, marriage to a coworker, retaliation for engaging in a protected activity. So what does that mean? They've maybe filed a complaint of sexual harassment, or they are having a conversation with a coworker about pay, or they are having a conversation about the management, and they posted that on social media. Those things are protected. Yes, there are some caveats in there, but for the most part, those are protected activities, and they're protected under the laws, the discrimination laws, and also under the National Labor Relations Act. Now, a lot of people say the National Labor Relations Act, that's for unions. Why would that apply to me? The National Labor Relations Act actually applies to all employers in the United States, whether or not they're a union or they have a union or not. So it doesn't matter. So those are the kinds of things you want to be careful of. Hair is also recently a protected category by the Crown Act. And CROWN stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, and that was passed in 2020. So it protects against the discrimination on the basis of one's race, including hair texture, type, hairstyle, those types of things. So you can't discriminate against someone because of their hair. So discrimination and harassment laws, when do they apply? Obviously in hiring, any kind of employment action, promotion, demotion, pay increases, shift assignments, work duties, right? Discipline actions, sure, and terminations, of course. Let's talk about at will for just a second. Colorado's an at will state. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you as an employer can fire anyone for any reason at any time with or without notice. All right. The employee can also leave at any time for any reason with or without notice. So when we ask for 2 weeks, that's a gift because the employee doesn't have to do that. All right. So you always in your handbook can say, we prefer that you give us 2 weeks notice. All right. We would request that you give us 2 weeks notice, those kinds of things, but you can't demand it. And you can't withhold somebody's PTO if they don't give you 2 weeks notice, or not pay them if they don't give you 2 weeks notice. That's actually protected under the at will. All right.
There was a quick
yeah,
question about discrimination and about the hair protection.
Okay.
Sounds like you mentioned specifically for natural hair. The question is, does that protect against unnatural hair color? Like if they dye their hair, blue or green or something?
Yeah. So, that's always difficult. But you have to think about, does that hair color interfere with the way they do their job? That would be the question that I ask. Is it something you prefer or not prefer? That's a different question, but does that hair color interfere with the way that they're doing their job? And does it impact the way they do their job? That would be the question that I would ask in that case. And I can tell you that in some cases, tattoos come up in this kind of same vein. Like, what do we do with tattoos, and how do we do that? So when I was an HR director for an ambulance service, we had a policy that said, if you have tattoos, you need to cover them up. And if you can't, like if you have a sleeve of tattoos, then we're just going to issue you a long sleeve shirt. Right. But that was 20 some odd years ago. Times have changed. Right. So what we're looking at now is we're looking at, does that tattoo interfere with the way that they do their work? So just ask that question. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Let's talk about compensation and overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act is the federal legislation that requires us to pay people a certain way. Employees are classified as exempt or non-exempt. And what that means is exempt. We typically think of exempt employees as salaried employees. They're getting a weekly salary, right? And non-exempt are typically hourly employees. Now there's some crossover because you actually can have an hourly exempt employee, but that's a little bit different flavor. So when you think about non-exempt, that's someone who gets overtime. They are not exempt from overtime. And when you think about exempt employees, they are exempt from overtime. All right. So overtime is based on the hours worked. In Colorado, it's either 40 hours in a week or 12 hours in a day or 12 consecutive hours. And the reason they also included 12 consecutive hours is somebody starts their shift at 10 o'clock at night and then leave, let's say at 11 o'clock the next morning, that's a 13-hour shift. And so that's 13 consecutive hours that they're scheduled for. So they would get 1 hour of overtime in that case. Overtime is 1.5 times the regular rate for that employee. And you can require authorization prior to that overtime being worked. That's okay. Put that in a handbook policy. That's perfectly acceptable. Here's the rub with that. If you hire me and I put in a 13-hour day and you require that I get prior authorization, you can't not pay me for those 13 hours. You have to pay me for the 13 hours, but you can write me up for breaking policy.
Mm.
So that's the difference, right?
Mhm.
The minimum wage right now in Colorado is $13.65 an hour. The tipped employee minimum wage is $10.63 an hour. Denver has its own minimum wage, and that's $17.29 right now. And the minimum salary amount, the threshold amount, you have to pay the people on salary at least $50,000, $50,000. That's $961.54 a week. And that is one of the qualifiers for being able to work on salary. The other qualifier is that they're paid on a salary basis. They're paid by a week, not by hour. And the other qualifier is that they have job duties that fall under one of the exemptions to be able to be paid salary. And you can look that up a lot of ways. You can look up exempt versus non-exempt employees. You can look up salary versus hourly employees. You can look up salary exemptions. There's a lot of information on the internet for you to review. The other thing that I wanted to talk about today is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. This is examples of generally accepted standards under OSHA. Keep work areas clean and orderly. Protect stairwells by guardrails and guard covers in floor openings, those types of things. Provide free and unobstructed exits from all parts of the building. Mark exits by lighted signs. Test the fire alarm and sprinkling systems periodically. Provide readily accessible fire extinguishers. Provide medical first aid supplies, maybe a first aid kit, maybe a AED, the automated electronic defibrillator. Put those up where they can be easily found. Have an emergency action plan for fires, emergency evacuations. I'd say in Colorado, fires obviously are a concern. Certainly tornadoes can be a problem. If there's a problem inside the plant, if it's a manufacturing plant, you want to make sure that everybody understands how to get out of the building and run drills to make sure that they can get out. And you need to have something in place to account for employees once they're outside the building. So if you have 37 people in a big manufacturing plant, for example, and they're going to have to leave, you've got to be able to say, okay, I know we had 37 people here today and I count 37 people, so we're all good. Everybody got out. All right.
Courtney, how does safety for inclement weather fit into that? Diane asked if, they under this law, could you be required to have to provide equipment to clear your car from ice or clear the sidewalks from ice or something like that? Would that fall into this?
Yeah, I don't know about cars. You wouldn't necessarily have to provide every employee with a scraper, but I mean, if you wanted to make that a giveaway, like swag with your logo on it, that would be great, right? You could do that. But as far as the sidewalks yes, absolutely. You've got to be clearing those off and putting down the salt and making sure that they have a safe passage into the building. A couple of different things. A lot of people lease spaces inside of strip malls or inside of bigger buildings or something like that. So they may have a maintenance crew that does that, but you as a business owner that are leasing space in there, you want to make sure that that's getting done. The second thing is you also want to talk to your landlord, if you will, about what kind of coverage do they have if one of your employees slips and falls in the parking lot. what does that look like? Because just from my knowledge of insurance, I would think that the landlord is going to say, well, that's an employee's workers' comp situation. And the workers' comp company is going to say, it wasn't even on our property. It was on the parking lot that was, kind of common property. So I don't know how that all works out, but I would make sure that your landlord has the proper insurance in place, that if somebody slips in the parking lot, that their insurance will cover that liability. And talk to your insurance broker about what kind of liability you have and what kind of coverage you need. Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You bet.
There were two other quick questions. Do you
Sure.
want to do those? Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. On the when we're talking about minimum wage in that conversation, the question was, do those numbers that you mentioned, do they include benefits, or is that in addition to benefits?
Yeah, that's just the wage. That's just the wage payment. So it has nothing to do with benefits. That is just what they get per hour of work.
Great, thank you. That clears that up. And then back to the discrimination and harassment again. Could you require a dress code for your business?
You can. So if you require a dress code, then you want to make sure that you're enforcing that the same all the way across the board. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to wear the same thing, right?
No.
So, but it does mean that if you have that dress code in your policy, you need to make sure that you're enforcing it and holding people accountable to it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Those are great questions. Thank you everyone for asking. And
Yeah.
I think we're good to move on for now.
Okay. All right, great. Let's talk about workers' comp. If you have a part-time employee, you need workers' comp. So workers' comp is one of those things. Obviously, it's going to cover your employees if they're injured on the job. And so you need to make sure that you have that coverage. You can work with your benefits broker to find the right policy for you. And while we're talking about insurance, I want to take just a little bit of a segue here and talk about employment practices liability insurance, EPLI. If you have employees, you should really look into getting EPLI coverage, employment practices liability insurance. This is coverage for the defense costs and damages related to various employment-related claims. So wrongful termination, discrimination, workplace harassment, retaliation, those kinds of things. This coverage helps cover that. Your regular business liability policy does not necessarily have the right limit amount, or maybe doesn't even have this coverage. So be sure to talk to your benefits broker about EPLI as well. And while we're talking, somebody mentioned dress code, right? You want to talk about the general policies that are in a company handbook. When we're talking about regulations, that's important. So make sure you've got some kind of welcome and introduction to the company history, talk about mission, vision, and value statements, those types of things in the handbook. You want to have hiring and orientation policies, wage and hour policies, what we were just talking about, which employees are exempt, which are non-exempt, what qualifies somebody for a full-time employee versus a part-time employee, what qualifies for overtime pay, they have to get authorization first, those kinds of policies in there for wage and hour policies. Performance and discipline policies. Performance, certainly you want to talk about performance standards and things that they can do and they can't do and those types of things in the handbook. Discipline policies, I see a lot of times in handbooks where it says, okay, we're going to follow a progressive discipline policy. We're going to do an awareness counseling session and then a verbal warning and then maybe 2 or 3 written warnings. And then we're going to suspend you and then we're going to terminate you. And that's our discipline policy. That's what we do. And they put it in writing and put it in the handbook. The problem with that is once you do that, once you put that information in the handbook, that's the policy you have to follow. So if I came in to work and hit Hannah in the face, sorry, Hannah, but thanks for being my guinea pig, and hit Hannah in the face, you would have to say, now, Courtney, I just want to make you aware of the fact that we don't hit our coworkers, right? And then I come in the next day and I do it and you say, okay, Courtney, we're now going to verbal warning, right? You don't want to have to do that. What you want to do is say, Courtney, you're fired because you just came in and hit Hannah in the face, right? And so when you have any kind of disciplinary policy in your handbook, make it say something like, discipline will be handed out based on manager discretion, depending on the infraction, right? Generalized, like, yeah, we discipline employees and we do it based on whatever happened. rather than here are all the steps. Know that those steps are in your bag. Know that you can have this progressive line of discipline with employees, attendance, attitude, performance, those kinds of things, right? But you want to be able to fire me if I come in and I hit Hannah in the face, and you should.
Mhm.
You should. Okay, you should fire me in that case. General policies, this is where you get into dress code and get into some of those things, just general policies. You want to have a general description of your benefits. You also want to have a line in your benefits that they can be in that policy, that it can be changed at any time. You could change your policies at any time. Safety and loss prevention policies. You know, obviously you want to make sure that the employees know that you want them to be safe and you want them to control expenses and you want them to, you know, those kinds of things. So that would be in there. Trade secrets and inventions. This is where it gets a little tricky, and you should probably talk to an attorney about your entire handbook, but this area specifically, because people are saying, oh, I want non-compete clauses and I want non-solicitation clauses and I want all these things. There have been recent rulings on what can and cannot be said in those policies, and recent like this year. So make sure that you're talking to an attorney about your handbook and specifically about any non-compete or non-solicitation policies you have. Any kind of customer relations information you want to put in there. And then acknowledgement of receipt form, that just says, and Diane, I see your hand, just 1 second. The acknowledgement of receipt form just says, hey, you know, I got the handbook. I'm going to read the handbook. I understand that I am responsible for knowing what's in the handbook. I understand it's not a contract. And I understand that it can be changed by management. So those types of points are in that acknowledgement of receipt form. And there are a lot of samples out there that can help you with that. And certainly your attorney can help you as well. Yes, ma'am. What question can I answer for you?
So thank you for this overview. This is really great. And
good.
I just wanted to say, when it comes to potential non-competes, my experience in my field has been, and I've had legal consult on this, Colorado has some pretty protective laws that a lot of national company non-compete rules in their contracts won't fly in Colorado.
Yep.
And so you know, it's unfortunate that people need to hire an attorney to tell them there's no teeth in this agreement. But it's good to have the consult to back you up. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that non-competes really don't fly very well in Colorado.
They don't. You're absolutely right. And it's even gotten tougher. So they didn't fly very well 2 or 3 years ago. And then Colorado tightened up on its non-competes and non-solicitation policies. And then the federal government came in and tightened up on them. So it's just a very difficult policy to write. So I appreciate your comments, Diane. Thank you so much. Okay, protected leave laws. So these are laws that if someone takes jury duty leave, for example, and then you decide you're going to fire them, and you don't have really good documentation for their performance, but that's why you want to fire them. You don't want to fire them having anything to do with the jury duty leave that they took, but you're going to fire them for performance and you have no documentation. You just know, oh, I've talked to them 100 times about this, or, you know, I've mentioned it to them or whatever. And you don't have any emails that underscore when you've talked to them. That employee can come back and say, I was fired because I went on jury duty leave. The onus is on you to prove that that's not true. You have to prove a negative. That's very, very difficult. So make sure that, number one, you don't fire anybody who is on any of these protected leaves that are listed here. Number two, you want to make sure that if you're having performance issues with an employee, you document it. And that can be done many, many ways. It can be done as a written warning. That's the most common here. Everybody understands that this behavior needs to change. It could be documented as an email, where you're sending an email and saying, hey, just wanted to follow up on our conversation. These are the points that I made. Please acknowledge this email. And the employee will write back, yes, I got the email. And so then you've got something for the file, right? Even just it's an email summarizing a verbal conversation, but you've got that for the file. And I have seen emails over time work. I had a client say, okay, I don't have any written documentation. And I said, do you have any emails? Oh yeah, I've got lots of emails. And I said, okay, you're going to an unemployment hearing. It's an appeal. Make sure that the documentation that you mentioned to the unemployment office, you take with you. And it was a stack like this of emails that they had sent the employee. So the employer walked in and said, here are the emails that, I've already sent through the process, but I wanted to bring them in. And so here's this stack of emails where the employer was saying to the employee, you've got to correct your behavior, right? So so make sure that you're documenting it in one way or another, and do make sure that you understand the protected leave laws in Colorado and federally, obviously, Family Medical Leave Act, Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act, et cetera. Hannah, anything we need to?
Yeah, a couple questions on this. So it sounds like the at will part doesn't really apply to these categories necessarily.
So, and that's great, because part of at will is it is totally at will, fire at any time for any reason, with or without notice, right? There's a huge asterisk by that. And this is one of those cases, right? That asterisk is you can do it as long as you don't do anything illegal. You're not discriminating against somebody. You're not firing them for being on a protected leave. You're not doing something illegal. You're not firing them because they reported sexual harassment or reported that you're doing something illegal. They were a whistleblower, right? So that at will, there's a huge asterisk there, because you can't fire somebody for something illegal, for a reason that is illegal. Maybe I should say that. If the employee does something illegal, that's different. But if you're doing something illegal by firing them in a discriminatory manner, or because they're on a protected leave, or because they participated in some kind of whistleblowing activity, or filed a sexual harassment complaint, or participated even in an investigation for sexual harassment or hostile work environment, you can't fire people for those reasons. So again, you would have to prove that you didn't fire them for those reasons if that came up.
Great, thank you. And then the other question is, can you elaborate on the Healthy Families Workplace Act and how that fits into this protection?
Yeah, so the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act is the paid sick leave in Colorado. So it's the 48 hours that I talked about. You're going to have to give every employee 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, up to 48 hours. You can't fire somebody for taking that protected leave.
Okay.
So if they're sick and they took that protected leave, you can't fire them. Okay.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So let's move on to the third leg of the stool, which is how to keep great employees. Let's talk about the first part of that, is how do we onboard them? So you've hired the employee's excited, you bring them in and you say, here's your desk, here's a manual, see you at noon, right? Not a great onboarding experience. You want to make sure that you're sending them a welcome letter, maybe sending some logoed items to them before they start, or at least have them on their desk before they get there. The other thing that I would say is make sure that your team is notified of the new person coming and when they're starting, so they're not surprised. Make sure that you assign what I'm calling a colleague. And this is what I used to say is assign a mentor. Everybody needs a mentor. That's great. And one of my clients said, oh, we don't do mentors, we do colleagues. And I said, talk to me about what the distinction is you're making. And she said, sure, colleagues are equals. Colleagues are friends. Like, we're going to be friends. And if you get into trouble, you can let me know what that is, and I can help you, and I can help you understand the organization and who's who, and maybe some of the politics that are involved and those kinds of things, right? And so that is part of that colleague relationship. A mentor is somebody that's above you, that has, I'm going to teach you how to do things. I'm going to help you do things. And all of a sudden it becomes more of a reporting relationship than we ever meant it to be, right? We meant it to be a positive thing, and you could go to them and ask for help without being in your direct line of reporting. But really, we have found that this assigning a colleague is much more beneficial, and the employee feels much more comfortable going and saying, I just totally screwed up. This is what I did. How do I fix that? Right? Rather than going to a mentor and saying, yeah, I totally messed up. They don't want the mentor to know they messed up. So assign a colleague, set up a workstation. I always use the example of, when somebody leaves the workplace and their workstation is sitting there, That's the workstation that everything goes to die. So the keyboard that's sticky, the monitor that doesn't work, the mostly used yellow pad, all the ink
Yeah.
pens are, basically should be thrown away. The pencils with no eraser and hardly any, any place to sharpen anymore. Those types of things go to that desk. So make sure that you're setting up a workstation with new materials and things. You don't have to put in a new monitor, but make sure it doesn't have a flicker or that it works. Do those types of things. Arrange access for the building, the computer, all of that. You want to make sure they can get in the morning. You want to make sure that they can get on to whatever computer programs you need. And then set up a team lunch or a happy hour, something to bring the team together and say, here's Susie. Isn't it great? Susie's here. We're so excited. This is fantastic. Let's all meet Susie, right? During the interview process, you can't ask anything personal about Susie. And so the team's going to want to know Susie. They're going to want to get to know them and incorporate Susie into the team. So make sure that you give them a chance to do that. And then also set up the training and the trainer. So don't just walk over and say, hey, Bob, here's Susie. And Bob say, I don't have time to deal with Susie. I've got all these other things to do. What are you talking about? I'm not going to. Make sure that you have that conversation with Bob before Susie's standing there. And so Bob understands what you're expecting of him and what you want to do. All right. Okay. Let's see. What is in our control with employees? I love this one. How we value employees. Right? How we show compassion, meaningful dialogues, active listening, seeing your employees, right? If employees become disengaged, they leave. There are many ways to disengage employees. And one of the biggest ways to do that is to let your employees feel unvalued. You want them to be engaged. You want them to feel valued, right? If you start micromanaging, turnover is going to happen. We were talking about that before. Oh, look, toxic. I don't like micromanagement. I'm out, right? So don't do it. Trust your employees that they're going to do their job. Look at results, not the way they get there, especially with remote employees. Everybody's like, I don't know if they're online at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. How do I feel uncomfortable about that one? Start managing to results. These are the things I need you to do this week. These are the things I need you to do today. Let's check back in at the end of the week or the end of today to see how you're doing. Don't worry about the time that they spend. Make sure that they're getting the results that you want them to do. Show your employees compassion. Show your employees compassion, care about their well-being, be alert to their actions. Are they showing signs of stress? And if they are, how are you going to manage that? Let's talk about what that, you've got to address it and say, you seem stressed. What does that look like? Do you need a couple of days off? I've worked with an employee that was repeatedly stressed, and every time I talked to her, something was wrong. Every time. And I finally said, how many hours are you working? And she said, oh, probably about 55. And I said, yeah, you're working 40 this week. 40 hours. I want you to work 40 hours. I don't mean just record 40 hours. I want you to just work 40 hours. Right. And that employee was like, what? Really? That would be delightful. Okay, good. And she came back with, well, what do you want me to not do? And I said, well, I can't determine your priorities, right? But if you have questions, we can get together and talk about that. We can get together and look at those priorities. So if they're showing signs of stress, address that. Engage in meaningful dialogue with your employees. Create a culture that welcomes feedback to monitor mental health. There's a great book out there. Hold on. I'm going to grab it. There's a great book out there called Feedback and Other Dirty Words. Okay. And it talks about feedback. How do we give feedback? How do we receive feedback? It's by M. Tamara Chandler. And so it's a great book. And if you want some good reading, that would be something I'd recommend. So listen to your employees and make sure that you're seeing your employees. They want to know that you care about them. They want to know that you want to help them be fulfilled. So please make sure that you're offering them that flexibility. And then what can you do right now? Again, just rethink educational industry experience requirements. Some people are saying, okay, you've got to have a bachelor's degree. Do you really? The EEOC is saying, probably not. There are very few professions, doctors, lawyers, architects, those kinds of things have to have a degree. Do you have to have a degree to sell furniture? Probably not. So just be thinking about that. Offer flexibility, remote, hybrid work options. Assess your wage competitiveness periodically every year. Look at that. Prioritize happiness and well-being of your employees. That does not mean that you don't discipline them. And let me just jump into performance management. You still have to set those expectations. You still have to coach them. You've got to hold them accountable. We talked about progressive discipline. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then you need to do that. And you need to make sure that you're documenting. Okay, that was a world tour in 50 minutes. I'm tired. I don't know about you, but whoo, all right. That's a lot. And so that was just information, partial information of what you need to do as a manager. So imagine managing. All of you are doing that. What I'm going to say is that management is not easy. And we talk about leaders. Yes, you need to be a leader. But management is where that rubber hits the road. Are we getting the job done? Are we meeting customers' needs? Are we doing those kinds of things, right? It's not just the visionary leader that we all need to be. It's actually how are we doing the nuts and bolts of working with our employees and getting things done. And that is a prime responsibility of any business owner. So hopefully this webinar has been helpful to you, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, this was super helpful. There are just a few questions to get us started in the chat. And I think this may have been mentioned, but going back again to the Healthy Families Workplace Act, does that include caregiving? Is that included in that act?
As far as what they can leave for?
Yes.
It is. Hold on, I'm trying to find the, there it is. So it does. If the employee has a mental illness or physical illness, injury, or health condition, needs a diagnosis, care, treatment related to an injury or an illness, that's covered. An employee needs to care for a family member who has a mental or physical illness or a health condition, or needs to seek care for that or treatment for that, that is covered. If an employee or family member has been a victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or harassment, and needs to be absent from work for purposes related to that, either for care or for court or for whatever, that's covered under this act. And then a public official has ordered the closure of a school, place of care, or in the employee's child's, like daycare center or the business. Sound familiar? Something like that happened in 2020, right? And so that's in there, and that's that public health emergency care. Okay.
Hi, sorry, I'm the one who asked the question about that, and I just a specific example of kind of what I'm struggling with right now. So I have an employee who has been calling out to care for a family member, and he's pretty much he's exhausted all of his sick time. So what happens after all of the sick time is exhausted and he continues to call out to caregive or to take, sick time? Like what happens after that?
So if he's already exhausted those 48 hours, right, then you can look at other policies you might have in your company, like personal leave or something like that. If he's exhausted all his leaves and you're not affected by Family and Medical Leave Act, because that if you have 50 or more employees, then he would have 12 weeks to care for that family member. And that would be covered under FMLA. This is not an Americans with Disabilities Act situation, because it's not him, it's somebody he's caring for. So what I would do is have a face-to-face conversation and say, look, we're out of leaves and we don't have any more options for you. We are out of paid and unpaid leaves now. So unfortunately you may have to part ways. Every situation is different. There's no way that I know this exact situation by what you're giving me. So that may have to happen, but you've got to be looking into making sure that you've exhausted all the leaves, you've paid him all that's due through the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. Okay.
Right. So like with the FMLA, you have to be an employee for a year, right? A minimum of 1 year. And so
yes. And you have to have more than 50 employees, 50 or more employees employed. And they have to be an employee for a year, and they have to have worked 1,250 hours in that 12-month period. A minimum of that.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
And then there was one more that is very related. Trying to find that again. Oh, if you kind of along the lines of like, if you feel an employee is abusing their sick leave, how does that play into those protections? For example, if they use, the few sick hours that they have accrued, like every time that they have that available, just so they could take off early on a Friday or something.
Yeah, that's tough, right? Those Monday, Friday absences, those are really tough. But if they are using sick time, that's protected leave.
Got it. Great. Great. Well, those are all our questions right now in the chat. Does anyone have any last questions they want to throw out there? Great. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. This has been so helpful, and thank you all for joining us. Like I said, all the resources and materials will be coming to your inbox later this
Thank you.
afternoon or tomorrow. And oh, I knew I was forgetting something again. Again, we want to give a big thank you to Westminster Economic Development, and encourage you to check out the link that'll come in the email about the rest of the workforce series that they are organizing, and some great content coming through that as well. So, and I will include Courtney's link as well if you'd like to, for some of these questions and topics that were maybe more specific to a situation you're going through. You can set up those consultations, or if you have other business questions, consultations with any of our other consultants to really dive into that specifically.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yes, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Courtney, so much. And we wish you all a great afternoon.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.